Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and get comfortable. You can kind of turn your chairs around if you like and face me. Or you don't have to face me, but you can if you want to face the stage. A couple of announcements before I introduce someone who's going to close us out tonight. This coming Sunday, one of the executive committee members, Richard Viguerie, is inviting everyone over to his place for a picnic on Sunday. He's going to have bluegrass music. Said he's going to be playing the spoons. Stu's going to be playing the jug, and we're going to have a great time. There'll be a barbecue, and you can tell that he's from South Louisiana Catfish, and all kinds of good stuff. 11 to 5, there'll be a bus that will leave here shortly after the Sunday morning church service. If you're interested in attending Richard's hoedown at his place, see the registration desk so they can get an RSVP for those that'll be there for food. Again, that's this Sunday from 11 to 5. It's about, Richard, how far long of a drive is it? About an hour and 15 minutes, depending on who's driving. So if you are going to be around Sunday afternoon, you might want to take advantage of that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce to you someone who you know very well, who has been a part of the leadership team, has been leading the Council for National Policy for the last 4 years as our executive director. And let me just tell you, working with Bob McEwen, he's been doing a great job here at the Council for National Policy. Of course, the real reason we hired Bob is we wanted to get Liz. But let me just say, they make a wonderful team, a great team, and just doing a great job. And Bob's going to come and, help. He helps put things in perspective of where we are in time and place. And so I'm going to ask you to put your hands together and welcome the Executive Director of the Council for National Policy, the Honorable Bob McEwen.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you all very much. Isn't it a great privilege to be a part of CNP? You see, there are think tanks in which people think about what needs to be done and put great minds to focus on how to solve problems. And that's a marvelous, marvelous work. But that's not what CNP does. There are people who make an impact on changing the direction. We have a Club for Growth and Marjorie Dannenfelser and other people that believe in getting out the vote to make a change at every level. But CNP doesn't do that. And there are people who have ministries that are dedicated. I think of Alan and Leslie Unruh, who take those that suffered from abortion, the mothers, that 15, 20 years later, and nobody listens to them or nobody cares because it's supposedly not to matter. And what do you do? And they take and hug them and love them and heal their wounds. This room is filled with people that do all of those things, but CNP doesn't compete in any of those areas. It lines them all together so that when we see something that needs to be done, we can do it jointly. And I just think that recently, this past week, the idea that was discussed about the budget, that the Congress will always do what is in its own best interest. And since if they feel it's in their best interest to not make a decision, they won't make a decision. And so if they go out for 2 weeks in the 4th of July and then come back and take a vote for recess in August so that they can go through Labor Day, the 1st of September, then you come at the end of September, and lo and behold, on October 1st, every year, the budget is due, and by that time, we haven't gotten the budget done, and you have to hear this 32-page, 32-foot-high budget just has to be voted on or the world will come to an end, and we can see it coming. And so when these individual groups that care about that, how do we corral them together? And so there's a group called the CNP Action Project that was conceived and directed by Ed Meese, who brings those folks together And we decided over the past couple of weeks, and then in the summit again yesterday, to join together to say to the Congress to make it in their best interest to not take off in the summer and come back and play that game with us. And really, nobody else could have done that. And so last Friday, why the President of the United States, because of Paul Teller and the other folks in this room that are on his staff, said this is what needs to be done. It'll be in your best interest. The President is on board. And all of us know that that needs to happen. And all of us care about it. And individually, we don't know how we could do it. But because of our joint efforts here, we now have over 100 organizations that are on board, and we'll see what happens. And so it's a... Now, no small part of that has to do with who is the decision maker in the Senate. And in the House of Representatives, there's a thing called the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee writes a rule for every bill. The rule will say the House shall meet on September 30th at 2:15 p.m., shall consider H.R. 5699. There shall be one amendment sponsored by the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. So-and-so. And the House operates according to the rules. The Rules Committee controls everything that's done on the floor of the House. In the Senate, there's one person that does all of that, and that's the majority leader. And the majority leader decides what bills come up and under what circumstances. And if he feels that they don't want to move those things, then it doesn't happen. And so that's why it's especially beneficial to our nation and to CNP that the president of the Council for National Policy has a relationship with the majority leader. And he invited the majority leader to dinner last night, and all of us loved him with the understanding that it is in his best interest to not back us up again to the end of the wall. And so while I'm on that topic, the Executive Committee of the Council for National Policy made a decision today, and that is to choose the leadership for the following year. And fortunately for all of us, they chose Tony Perkins for one more year. And let me just say that there's no way to overemphasize the significance of this, because Tony has the capacity to do things that none of us have the capacity to do, such as invite the majority leader to dinner last night. And what he does on his backstroke is much greater than most people could do if they focused on it for 3 months. And so by him being the president, and then Bill Walton with his business expertise looked over the books at the Council for National Policy and says, if we tweak this and tweak that, we can have a very formidable organization. And because of his leadership, it's happened. And then we have Rebecca Hagelin, who is the recorder or the secretary of the organization. And then we have the treasurer, who you don't argue with because she was the first president of the National Rifle Association, female president of the National Rifle Association, and Sandy Froman. But I also want to dwell on that just a bit, because the National Rifle Association has had 2 women presidents, and they're both here tonight. And the other one is Carolyn Meadows, who is the current president. And then she will be replaced very shortly by the next president, who will be our speaker tomorrow night. So the point is that of the leadership that has made it possible for this organization to have an impact on our nation, for those of us that care. We care about our country, and we don't know exactly where to put our energies and put our focus. I think CNP has no desire to compete with any of the folks that are doing things. The Media Research Center is unlike any other organization, because the media is a real threat to the future of our nation. And Brent Bozell and his folks have banded together to expose them. Light reveals darkness as to what they're doing. And so by his being a part of this, and that's not something we want to do, but we want to help him do that, and help them do that. And you understand the issues, number one. Number two is, and that timer is going to be fun, because I need to get started here in just a second. But I want to say also something about our speaker tonight. When you hear that the country goes in a strange direction or a difficult direction, and the president did this and the president did that, you stop and have to ask yourself, how did the president actually do that? You mean the assistant secretary made these decisions with these left-wing organizations in Europe because of President Obama? Does he really know that? Well, let me explain how that works. The president of the United States is 2 people. It is the National Security Advisor. And the National Security Advisor travels with the president at all times, and he is the intermediary between the State Department, the Defense Department, and the intelligence services. And so if you're the Secretary of Defense and you want to meet with the president, you call the National Security Advisor, who is with him at all times, who monitors all of that. Then there's another person on the other side, and that person is singularly the most powerful person on the planet, and that is the director of the Office of Management and Budget, the director of OMB. And the director of OMB controls every dime that is spent, every contract that is signed, and every regulation that is made. So that if you're the Secretary of Agriculture and you say, I want to make a change in the sugar program, and I think we should do this, and you have the hearings, and then you have the comment period, and you publish it in the Congressional or in the Federal Register, and you do all of those things, that's all fine, Mr. Secretary. Because when you're finished, you're going to take that over to the Office of Management and Budget, and that's where the president decides whether or not it's going to go in that direction. So the director of OMB is a very, very powerful position. But not unlike some of the secretaries and things, he has to do public appearances and all. And so it's critical that he have a deputy that is committed to those things as well, who is going to monitor it all day, every day, and will have more power and potency in the direction of the country than perhaps anyone else that you and I would know. That is why when the president chose a man of principle, that you notice when you start to stand for righteousness, maybe other people won't notice, but Satan will notice. And he'll take note of what you're doing. And the president chose a man who went to Wheaton College. My wife went to Wheaton College. My daughter went to Wheaton College. It's a college that stands for American principles. It was founded by Mr. Blanchard, who was a strong believer in equality for everyone, and so it was the second college in the world, in America, that had, regardless of gender or race or anything else, you could be enrolled in the college, and it's the place where Billy Graham graduated, and it's just an outstanding stand for principle. So if you nominated someone who went to that school, that means it wouldn't be hard just to go back and see where he stands. And here's an interesting fact. Scripture recognizes the equality of individuals. The further you get away from Scripture, the more you get into tribalism, regardless of where it is all over the world. And as you get close to what God made us and who we are, then you see equality. When you go away from that, then you get into groups. And America was founded on the principle that all of us were equal in His sight. He created us. Now, when we elect people who are not dedicated to that principle, then they want to make us into tribes. And the significance of tribes, that your tribe must agree with my tribe or I will destroy your tribe. That's the opposite of freedom. It's the definition of tyranny. And we happen to experience it. Take a look at this brief little encounter in the Senate one day. Do
you believe that people in the Muslim religion stand condemned? Is that your view?
Again, Senator, I'm a Christian, and I wrote that piece.
Well, what does that say?
The statement of faith of Wheaton.
I understand that. I don't know how many Muslims there are in America. I really don't know. Probably a couple of million. Are you suggesting that all of those people stand condemned? What about Jews? They stand condemned too?
Senator, I'm a Christian.
I understand you are a Christian, but this country is made up of people who are not just. I understand that Christianity is the majority religion, but there are other people who have different religions in this country and around the world. In your judgment, do you think that people who are not Christians are going to be condemned?
Thank you for probing on that question. As a Christian, I believe that all individuals are made in the image of God and are worthy of dignity and respect regardless of their religious beliefs. I believe that as a Christian, that's how I should treat all individuals.
And do you think your statement that you put into that publication, they do not know God because they've rejected Jesus Christ the Son and they stand condemned, do you think that's respectful of other religions?
Senator, I wrote a post based on being a Christian and attending a Christian school that has a statement of faith that speaks clearly with regard to the centrality of Jesus Christ in salvation.
I would simply say, Mr. Chairman, that this nominee is really not someone who is what this country is supposed to be about. I will vote no. Senator Gardner.
And so because of what you did, that's the direction our country was headed. Because of what you did, we've begun to turn the tide. And on a 50-50 vote, The Vice President of the United States said, no, sir, that's exactly the kind of person we want as our speaker tonight. Russ, would you stand up? Russ, we're going to continue to pray for you because this nation is the lighthouse for freedom. I, over the next week, will speak at 3 presidential prayer breakfasts in 3 European countries. I've mentioned before that in 2016, all of them had as their main topic the elections in America, because they know that we are the ones that protect them. Let me, half my time is gone. I haven't started. Let me go quickly. Leadership, the strength of a nation comes in 4 categories: economic, military, political, and leadership. Those 4 things determine what happens to a country. Let's just look over our shoulder, 18 months, look at today, and then quickly forward in 3 minutes. In 4.5 minutes, I'll be through. Economics. When Barack Obama became president, 17 million people were on food stamps. By the time he left, 41 million were. It had the economy grown under the Barack administration at the same rate as the average since World War II, the average family would have $17,500 more in real purchasing power. That's the impact economically of what his program. Militarily, you know what happened. The Air Force, on the day that Donald Trump became president, the Air Force is smaller than it was the day it was created. The United States Navy is smaller than it was since the 19th century, since Teddy Roosevelt was Secretary of the Navy, shortly before McKinley. The United States Army is smaller than it was on December 7th, 1941, when it was the 17th largest military in the world, smaller than Romania. And only 20% of the Army units are combat ready. He canceled the SDI Strategic Defense Initiative that you know was championed by Dan Graham, a member of CNP, and his deputy Hank Cooper, who took over from there and developed the Strategic Defense Initiative. And Hank Cooper is with us tonight, and his dream is coming true. Militarily, the Chinese began to weaponize individual islands and began to make islands out of these little atolls. They would put landing strips on them. And the head of the Chinese military said 2 weeks ago, we were appalled that the United States never protested what we were doing in the South China Sea. And of course, as we withdrew from the two-front war and began to no longer have our fleets in the Indian Ocean, the India and China, who have been competitors for millennia, signed a defense agreement to supplant the United States leadership since World War II in that area. That's what happened under the military under our predecessor, and that's where the direction the country was headed. Political, as you know, he apologized, and everyone should, when you get a chance, go look at the first speech that Barack Obama made abroad in Cairo in June of 2009. And if you watch what he said to the Muslim Brotherhood, remember the Muslim Brotherhood were formed at the end of World War I when they saw that they weren't going to get their caliphate back, and they formed for the purpose of overthrowing those individual governments, so they've always been anathema to those governments. They know who they were, they watched him, and when they were able to kill Anwar Sadat because he made peace with Israel, they were not allowed to function in any way, shape, or form in Egypt, and Barack Obama went to Cairo and invited them at the request of the United States that they be given visas to come hear him speak, told the president of Egypt, Hosni Mubarak, that he could not attend, and that speech is available, and it's very, very revealing. Of course, you understood he bowed to various potentates around the world. I could go on, but one of the most recent was that before he left office, at the request of the Iranian government, he had asked for $1.7 billion in cash. Now, nobody else can do that except the United States. They had to go get pallets of cash of different currencies from around the world. Now, why do you want cash? Because that's what you use to pay terrorists. If you write them a check and they go to the Royal Bank of Scotland, then the facial identity or identify who they are, you have to have cash, and nobody else could have given it to them except the United States. And that's what our previous president did. But however, shortly thereafter, we had an election last fall. And economically, the strength, the collective investment in the markets of the United States have increased by a third. So you go from the founding of the country to 2016, and you increase it a third just in the last 14 months. Now, here's being liberals, logic does not deter you a bit. You just say, well, the reason the economy took off was because that's what Barack Obama had determined. He had it all planned, that when he walked out, he'd flip a switch and the economy would take off, and he's the one that we should thank. And I just want to ask the question. The day after Donald Trump was elected president in November, over the next 30 days, the stock market climbed over 1,000 points. Over the next year, it continued to climb another 5,000 points. Now, our question would be this. Suppose the day after he got elected, the stock market fell 1,000 points over the next 30 days, and then continued to fall another 5,000 over the next 12 months. Would you say that that was Barack Obama's reason, or would you think that it was the impact? Well, you understand. Unemployment, we've discussed what's been happening. Militarily, reestablishing our strength as best we can, but reestablishing the Strategic Defense Initiative that will be functioning by the end of next year for the first time in our nation's history. The idea that we cannot defend ourselves, just to walk through that as a reminder, Ronald Reagan came up with the idea that it would be better to shoot a missile down before it hit us. And that was considered radical and provocative to those who are not our fans. And they said, first of all, it can't be done. You cannot hit a bullet with a bullet. And what was Ronald Reagan's response? We're Americans. What do you mean we can't? And so in a matter of months, they figured out how to do it. And then the Congress, controlled by the opposition party, passed the law in the defense bill that we could not test that in the atmosphere. That meant that once we learned how to do it, you could test it on a low level, but how would you have to go out in the atmosphere? Only to defend America. And so, because we were able to develop, we were able to give it to our friends in Israel. And they have what's called the Iron Dome, conceived, invented, maintained by Americans, financed by Americans. And so when they shoot missiles, they can shoot them down before it hit us. But if they aimed to America, we have nothing to defend us. We were within 60 days. May of 2009, it was finally all going to be operative. You have to have altitude, longitude, and latitude. You have to have a three-prong. And you had the radar in Czech Republic, and you had the missiles in Poland, and they'd finally agreed, and sure enough, we had elected a person in 2009 who said, we don't want to defend America. And in March, 60 days before it became operative, he pulled the plug, and now it has to be reinstated. Unfortunately, it is being done so. Economically, militarily, politically, we have a president who doesn't bow or apologize. If you want to step on our flag, he will call you for it. He will stand optimistically about America. He canceled the Clean Power Plan, which was the excuse by the Obama administration to prevent America from being productive. First of all, since 1975, America has not been allowed to export oil. So now that we're not allowed to export it, now if we can just shut it down, its production here, America is going to be increasingly dependent upon others. And so we saw what happened to coal. We saw what happened in every area. He repealed it. He didn't think about it, didn't ask for permission. He didn't debate it for 6.5 years. He just did it. And as a consequence, coal exports are up 70%. He took the pipeline, the XL pipeline and the Keystone pipeline, approved them both. They're under construction as we speak. In 1987, the United States has the largest natural gas resources of any place on the planet. The reserves for natural gas in America are the highest of any place in the world. And so in 1987, there was an effort to make an LNG, a liquefied natural gas port in Louisiana. The environmentalists came in. It hasn't been built until this president, 90 days after taking office, said, enough of that, start building it. And so and also he repealed the 1975 prohibition, such as you heard earlier today, that for the last 2 months, America has been the second largest exporter of oil in the world. Just a matter of time until next year, we will be the largest exporter of oil in the world. That means that the money that we used to send abroad, we will spend here. Rather than spending money to our enemies to use against us, they will have to invest money here. It only takes common sense. See, political A businessman is an appropriate thing to have periodically. And then when it comes to leadership, he understands leadership. NATO, in order for us to protect them, they contribute their various parts. And Denmark, God love them, the entire Navy, it consists of 6 minesweepers, and they have contributed that to the NATO joint effort. And we ask that to whom, however much you have, that at least 2% of your gross domestic product go to help the cause. And of course, they never do it. Why? Because they know Americans are going to do it anyway. So they periodically, every 3 to 5 years, they have a big ceremony, a big signing ceremony, and they say they're going to meet their obligations, they're going to be faithful, and we're going to do it. Of course, they never do it. It's a big act. Everybody knows about it. But Donald Trump is not a politician. He's a New York developer. And by the way, you know what a developer does for a living? A developer sits at his desk and lets people come in every 15 minutes and say, you can't do that. You can't have those bricks by November. You can't have that easement. We cannot have electricity. And unless you use my bricklayers, your wife is going to be floating in the East River. And if you don't, and all day long, he deals with that for a living. He comes to Washington and says, this is a piece of cake. I mean, this is not complicated. And so he said on the campaign trail, he said, NATO, I don't think we need to do it. NATO is 70 years old. I mean, those folks, they can defend themselves. They'll be able to do this. The Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. I'm just not sure we need to be a part. And brother, did they ever just get all excited, stand up on their chairs and say, we'll meet our obligation, we'll do it. And he hadn't done or said a thing. And every nation is now beginning to meet their obligation under NATO. Even North Korea is starting to get some sense. Now, let me tell you about 80% of all of the transactions in North Korea go through the Dedong Bank on the border in China. It's a Chinese bank, and it is the virtual home central bank for North Korea. Now, Donald Trump didn't threaten to do anything. In November of last year, he sanctioned the Dedong Bank, which means that it can't function. It can't buy and sell money. It can't do it. And lo and behold, everybody suddenly got a new spirit about themselves. Now, we don't know what all is going to happen, but it makes common sense. This is the way a logical leader would behave. And I repeat, we don't know what's going to come of it, but we see what's happening. For 70 years, people have said we're going to negotiate where the capital of Israel should be and how much it should be, and that'll all be a part of a peace negotiation, and we need to talk about that. And it's been going on for decades and decades and decades. And Donald Trump said, well, if this is such a burden and you can't figure out what to do it, I think we'll just proceed until you get around to it. So we're going to make it the capital. And when we have a negotiation, we'll come back and talk about the negotiation. But in the meantime, we're going to proceed. In other words, so if you want to sit here and think that you have a veto by not doing anything, the veto is going to leave you at the desk. And it just, I repeat, it's what a New York developer would do. And I think it's in the best interest of our nation. With the Iran situation, as you know, the negotiation was, and you look at every decision that was made by the Obama government, it was always in favor of the Iranian Shiites. Let me say it again. Every decision that he made eventually redounded to the benefit of the Shiites, which are a minority in the Muslim world. Subsequently, when Donald Trump, in his first trip abroad, went to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, 55 heads of states of Muslim countries came to visit him. That audience where he spoke, where they're all sitting in their lazy boys, those big chairs that they were all sitting, were all various sheikhs and presidents of countries that are Sunni and that wanted America to be fair and hoped that that would be the case. Because Barack Obama had given the Shiites in Iran not only the money with which to do it, and the money that he gave to them, by the way, is 50% of their GDP. Now, that's like somebody walking into America and dumping $7.5 trillion on the United States and handing it to them. And that's what he did. And so how do you justify something like that? You say, well, it was money that belonged to them anyway. Nonsense. That's like saying to the Nazis that they're entitled to have the art that they stole from the Jews that they killed. You came along and decapitated the people that owned those businesses and ran and now you're going to come back 20 years later and say that you're entitled? I don't think so, but nevertheless, Barack Obama gave him the money and the process, and of course they immediately began to buy military equipment from Russia and to buy Airbus transports from Europe. And Donald Trump this week said, I'm out. We're not going to do that. We're going to reinstate the same sanctions that we had before. In other words, if you sell those Airbuses to them, you're going to be out of the Airbus business, because we're going to sanction any sales by Airbus any place around the world. And lo and behold, you thought it was so handy that Barack Obama gave you all that money, and you have it sitting in banks around the world. We're sanctioning those banks, that money cannot come to you. He literally reverted, except for the damage that was already done in the nuclear weapons program. Donald Trump has put them back to where they were before they got all that blessing from the previous president. We could go on, we could talk about the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, that over 80% of all of the Muslims that claimed that they were being offended someplace on the planet, the UN High Commissioner sent them to the United States of America, and we accepted them. Donald Trump withdrew from that program and put a ceiling of 45,000 per year that could come. In the military, as you know, if you're flat-footed or colorblind or diabetic or various other things, you can't be in the military. Donald Trump said, if you don't know what gender you are, then you shouldn't be in the military either. And then he went after ISIS, and of the 6 leaders of ISIS, the high commander is still in charge, but his 5 deputies were all taken into custody or killed over this last 10 days. And ABC and CBS did not mention it for a second. So the concluding thought would be this.
Half a minute. Most of the rest of the
just a moment. Somebody's ready to go to battle. I think this is one step above getting a hook. Let me just say that this great country has been in a lot of troubles before. When George Washington started out, he had to sell an idea that nobody had ever done before. He had to sell people to go to fight against the most powerful nation on earth, and they had no guns, they had no money, they had no country, they had nothing except the idea and the commitment to freedom. And it's hit bumps along the way, and we don't have that problem. Half of all the people on earth live on less than $2 a day. Half of those live on less than $1 a day. The second richest spot on earth is Western Europe, France, Germany, Britain. In America, we have a level below which we will not permit a person to sink. You come to this country, you complain about, sit on the park bench, gripe and complain, we will bury you with stamps for food, a roof over your head, a bed to sleep in, unlimited health care for you and anybody you've ever met, education. A person living in poverty in America, fortunately done by the Heritage Foundation, the Rector study, and Wall Street Journal every 24 months for the past 37 years, a person living in poverty in America is more likely to have a telephone, a television, an air conditioner, an automobile, eats more meat, has more square footage space than the average resident of the second richest spot on earth, Western Europe. Our definition of poverty. The 4th largest nation on earth, Indonesia, as you remember, that's where our previous president grew up. It's virtually the same population of the United States. It's over 300 million. The GDP of that nation, the 4th largest nation on earth, is smaller than the state of Louisiana. Now, can you imagine everybody in America having to live on the GDP of Louisiana? The 6th largest nation on earth, nearly 200 million people, the GDP of that nation is smaller than the state of Arkansas. 91 million Filipinos produce less wealth than the 3 million Oklahomans. This nation has been blessed as no other nation, and it has been a blessing to the world. No other nation. Just think for a moment. What other nation if another nation could send men to the moon? If they could. What other nation would send men to the moon? And they would read as they circled the moon on an international hookup that in the beginning it was God that created the heavens and the earth. And as they land on the moon, they take communion in recognition of Christ shedding his blood for all mankind. Only this country.
This is the lighthouse for the gospel. If you take all the money that goes for global evangelism and you put it in a pile from all the rest of the 96% of the population of the world, and you put it all in a pile, double it, triple it, the United States, 4%, gives more than 5.5 times more to global evangelism than the rest of the world combined. This is the lighthouse for the gospel. And so this is involved in a spiritual warfare. And therefore, Scripture says you could take a city, must bind the strong man. There's only one strong man in the world. It's the United States of America. And we have been so abundantly blessed that we don't have to sell an idea. We know that it's been done. Americans invented the airplane, the light bulb, the motion picture industry, the sound recorder, the telegraph, the telephone. If an 11-year-old girl in Czechoslovakia has lost her puppy dog, she can take an iPad and go online and through a GPS hookup find out where her puppy dog is. Now, the entire system, the internet, the GPS, the iPad, all conceived, invented, and maintained by Americans. There are ships that are parking in the harbor at Singapore that are using a GPS global positioning system conceived, invented, maintained by Americans. The corroded corruption of the infrastructure throughout all of Africa, you couldn't even fly unless Americans maintained the system. If a ship is attacked on the high seas, as happened over 300 times last year, to whom can they appeal? Only the 327,000 Americans that wear the uniform of the United States Navy. The entire world is dependent upon when there is theft in any system or any place, or when there is a catastrophe anywhere, they know that the Americans are there on their side. And that's what has been entrusted to us. And when those that have been fighting over a long period of time, they have to look at what we went through, or what we're going through now, and say, you know, really, it was a lot harder when I was doing it. You know, when this country was getting divided in a war between the states, it looked as though that perhaps the South would be successful. If it was, what was going to happen was that North and South would divide into two countries. Well, one country wouldn't allow the other one, west of the Mississippi, to be like it. So west of the Mississippi would have been a third country, or a fourth, or a fifth. Now, if that were to happen, then in World War I, when the entire world is tearing itself apart, over 1 million casualties at Verdun alone, then there would have been no United States of America to arrive on May 29th, a week from now, 100 years ago. And when Americans went into battle on May 29th, June, July, August, September, October, November 11th, in 5.5 months, put an end to World War I. Had there not been a United States of America, in World War II, when Hitler took all of Europe, when Imperial Japan raped and pillaged throughout all of the Pacific, raping and killing over 200,000 in just Nanking alone, there would have been no United States of America to bring peace and prosperity to any of those nations. When they started, 1939, America made 18 tanks. Its complete tank force was 359. Its complete aircraft force was 3,000. And as I said, the Army was smaller than Romania's. But they felt that if they could just take America out, Japan would be free and clear to do what it wanted. And Admiral Yamamoto, who was in charge of that attack, had graduated from Harvard and been a defense minister and attaché in Washington. After they attacked America December 7th, he said, "I fear we have awakened a sleeping giant." And as you know, over the next 46 months, we built 88,816 tanks, over 300 aircraft, over 220 combat aircraft, in addition to cargo and transport, put over 12.2 million men under arms, and freed the entire world. All in less time, by the way, than the Obama administration was able to find an Obamacare website that could work. But let me give you this one particular thought. America was within 2 minutes of disappearing. It was July 1st, 1863, in a little town called Gettysburg. Some folks had encountered one another. They had seen who was going where, and the Federal forces were lined up outside of town, and the red was the enemy. And at the end of the day, the Federals had been thoroughly defeated. By the next day, they had been run all the way through town, and now they're back down to a point in a little fish hook, and they're surrounded. And they're about to attack at the end to get around behind. You know, having the high ground, they're on Seminary Ridge. Having the high ground is a good thing unless you're completely surrounded, as in Masada. And if they could just get around behind them, the battle would be over. The war would have been ended, and the United States would not have existed as we know it. And so the 7th and 42nd Alabama regiments attacked the 20th Maine, led by a 34-year-old school teacher by the name of Joshua Chamberlain, who was told that he was at the end of the line, and if they came through him, they might lose the entire battle, and as he told to his troops, we'll lose the war. They left Maine 6 months earlier with 1,000 men. They began the day with 300. After the third attack, they're running out of ammunition. He says, well, you need to take ammunition from the dead and the wounded. They said, we did that last time. They're now down the fourth time. They're about to be attacked again, but they can see they're being reinforced by the Texans. And he has nothing with which to shoot. He knows that if he stands here, he's going to die. If he dies, the battle will be lost. America will disappear. And one man made one decision, one time. He used 2 words: fix bayonets. Can't shoot. We don't have anything to shoot with. So what we're going to do is we're not going to give up. This country is worth saving. And we're going to give our lives, just as they signed our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, so we know what's coming. There's nothing I can do about it, but I'm not going to stand here and let them roll over us. Fix bayonets. And so they did. And you heard the slamming of the steel on steel. And then he said the second word, charge. And Joshua Chamberlain and the 20th Maine charged down the hill into a much superior force. And was, well, let's just see how it looks.
Sir, half my men are down. Most of the rest are wounded. The left is too thin, sir.
How are we fixed for ammunition?
It's almost gone.
Sir, we're running out. We don't have much left to shoot with. Some of the boys got nothing at all.
Sir, what do we do for ammunition?
Sir, my boys have bread muskets and they're firing back with them.
Sir, we ought to pull out.
No, we can't do that.
We can't hold them again, sir. You know that.
Well, if we don't, they go on by and over the hill and the whole flank caves in.
Sir, here they come.
Well, we can't run away. If we stay here, we can't shoot. So let's fix bayonets. We'll have the advantage of moving down the hill. They got to be tired, the Revs. They got to be close to the end if we are. So fix bayonets. Ellis, you take the left wing, I'll take the right. I want a right wheel forward of the whole regiment.
What, you mean charge?
Yes, but here's what we do. We're going to charge swinging down the hill. Just like we pulled back to this left side of the regiment, now we're going to swing it down. We swing like a door. We're going to sweep them down the hill just as they come up. Understand? Does everybody understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Ellis, you take the left wing, and when I give the command, I want the whole regiment to go forward, swinging down to the right.
All right, sir. Fine.
Move.
Right wheel!
Charge.
They gave their all that we would be able to be here tonight. This room is filled with people who have blessed this nation in many different ways. If you'll notice, written and directed by our own Ron Maxwell. If you would stand, Ron, we want to thank you for being here tonight. He's sitting next to Tony Lobianco, who was the star of The French Connection and 100 other films. So Tony, well, just while you're there, we want to thank you for being here tonight. This entire room is filled with champions, people that know what made America great and are committed to keeping it so. And on behalf of all of us who love you and love our country, it's an honor for Liz and me to be with you and to thank you for what you're doing and what we will do and what we will accomplish in the years ahead. God bless.
Thank you, Bob McEwen. Well, I think the only way we can finish that is to mention that we're going to have a prayer service tonight at 10 o'clock. 10 p.m. a prayer service will be held in the Plaza Room on the 6th floor. And, you know, that is one of the threads that is woven throughout the history of this nation, is that we had a people that had a courage, but they had a courage that came from their faith. And may we never forget the source of our strength and the hope that we have. In the morning, breakfast will be available in the ballroom foyer from 7:30 to 9:30 a.m. Member reports begin at 8:20 a.m. Our CNP Executive Committee member, Trent England, will be leading that session. So you'll want to come in the morning and be here to find out what your fellow CNP members are involved in. I'm going to ask Robert Alt to come and lead us tonight in our benediction. And following our benediction, there is a dessert reception out in the lobby there. That is being sponsored tonight by the Buckeye Institute, for which we are very grateful. And Robert is the president and the chief executive officer of the Buckeye Institute. He has contributed over 100 articles and blogs to the National Review Online and has been widely published in newspapers of record across the country, and not to mention frequent appearances on national television and radio broadcast. He and his wife, Rebecca, make their home in Columbus, Ohio, and again, we're very grateful for the Buckeye Institute for sponsoring tonight's dessert reception. Please welcome Robert Alt as he comes to lead us in our benediction.
Thank you, Tony. Let me begin by saying I have one basic rule when it comes to public speaking. Never follow Bob McEwen. 6 days ago, my team of 4 fellow mountaineers were awakened before dawn by a call for help for an injured climber. We were camped on the side of a mountain. 65-mile-an-hour winds howled around us, and 90-plus mile-per-hour winds gust at the summit above us. We had built tall snow walls to protect our tents from the elements. My team was making preparations to begin our ascent to the summit in just a few hours. The young lady had likewise ascended one of the tallest mountains in the continental United States. However, in stark contrast to the heavy bags of gear we had schlepped up, she had arrived to this high altitude in a place aptly named Avalanche Gulch, without a helmet, without proper warm clothing, without an ice axe, and perhaps worst of all, without any water. After reaching for a cell phone which she had dropped, she fell head first, more than 2,000 feet, down an icy, rocky slope. By all normal accounts, she should have died on the mountain that last Saturday, if not from the fall, then from the lack of preparation. When we got to her, she was in shock and hypothermia was setting in. We treated her wounds, wrapped her in our sleeping bags, sheltered her in our tents, and hydrated her with our water. The rescue helicopter made 2 passes but couldn't land due to the high winds. Eventually, a search and rescue team was able to pull her down the mountain by sled. She lived. 3 weeks ago today, actually to this very hour, I was seated in an overcrowded waiting room at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, waiting for my wife's surgeon to emerge from the operating room and update me on how her surgery went. Only 2 days before that, everything was normal. We went to work as usual. We argued about which one of us was the better driver. No comment. And I set up a fancy new blender, and we made a breakfast smoothie with something awful that my wife had gotten called kefir. We had no idea what was coming 2 days later when we met this specialist who had discovered a polyp that was now taking up more than 1/3 of her uterus. The doctor said it did not look good, and emergency surgery was required the day after next. They suspected cancer. I was alone in that waiting room, fearing the worst, hoping for the best, and positive that, no matter what the outcome, my wife was the best thing that had ever happened to me, and certain that we have been blessed. The surgeon emerged. The growth was benign. And everyone we know said that afterward, God is good. I guess what struck me is that statistically, maybe half or more of those people in the waiting room with me 3 weeks ago were not going to hear the greatest word of all time, benign, and yet God would still be good. There are many of us in this room facing struggles, hardships, and deep difficulties today or recently. It is in the spirit of recognition that even amidst those challenges, perhaps especially because of those challenges, we have so much for which to be thankful. A second chance at life, perhaps, in both of those stories. That is what I took away. Both cases could have been deadly, and yet both women were spared. My wife wrote this prayer several years ago. I share it here today, along with my gratitude for her partnership. Unless there be any doubt with regard to the unresolved question, I'm indisputably the better driver. Let's pray. O God, we invoke your continued blessing today upon our country. Instruct those who exercise lawful authority so that they may administer the affairs of state reflectively, with wisdom and integrity. That peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and liberty may forever abide in our midst. Banish vice from our hearts and safeguard virtue in our lives as we aspire to uphold the ideals upon which our great nation was founded. Unite our citizens, and may this land, under your providence, be an influence for good throughout the world. May our homes be kept safe and our cities and countryside renewed in beauty and order. Protect, with your almighty hand, the warriors who valiantly guard our freedom in dangerous places around the world. Grant them the courage and resolve they need to execute their missions while enduring separation from loved ones and the familiar comforts of home. Shield them from the enemy and extend to them a true sense of your presence. Remember the hardworking men and women whose labor gave us this program, this hospitality, and these meals, the excellent CNP staff, and the indispensable Bob McEwen. Bestow special grace on each of us today so that together we may proceed to reflect light everywhere we go and in everything we do. We stand humbly before you asking these things in your name. Amen.
Good night, everyone. We'll see you in the morning.